Hey gang, before we get into this next episode, can I just say it would mean the world to me if you can go ahead and like this episode and also subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't yet. Plus, if you enjoy the episode, sharing the content with your friends, family, coworkers, or anyone else you think might benefit from what you're hearing, it helps so much. It's not just about the algorithm, it's about sharing the ideas that are being talked about on this show and creating more community through compassion. So again, if you enjoy the show and you like what you're hearing, don't be afraid to subscribe. It means more than you can possibly know. And frankly, at the end of the day, it means that we get to engage more with each other. And that's really what this is all about. Hey gang, I'm Nikki LaCroce and you're listening to Who the Fuck. And on today's episode, I'm sharing the mic with David McClam. David's a podcast host and survivor of domestic abuse. As the creator and host of his show, True Crimes, Authors, and Extraordinary People, David combines his passion for true crime and his passion for reading while offering a safe space for others to share their stories of resilience and healing. David and I had an amazing conversation a few weeks ago. If you haven't heard that episode on the show, go check it out. But in the meantime, we are here to learn more about who the fuck David is. Welcome to the show, David.
Hey, glad to be with you, Nikki. Incredible time to be here. Thank you.
Absolutely. I am so excited for this conversation. You are such a passionate and just good individual. I feel like the word good is an understatement, but I also feel like it is super important to acknowledge because we were just chatting before here about how it's so meaningful to do these shows and to create an opportunity for people to come along and share who they are and what they've been through and use that as an opportunity to invite listeners to really think about their own lives and just hopefully either gain some perspective or have the catalyst for getting the help that they need. So it's really an honor to have you here and to have been on your show. I mean, that was an incredible healing moment for me. So thank you in general for offering that space.
Well, thank you for coming on. Thank you for having me here. It's incredible being your show. I've been listening to it. You do an awesome job. Your episode is probably one of the most common episodes that I get. So just want to let you know it's reaching a lot of people. And I'm glad not only to have met you that day, but to continuously call you my friend. So you're doing an incredible job. I appreciate it.
Likewise. So I thought we could kind of start with on your show, you're asking a lot of people a lot of different things about their stories. And I add elements of your life. As I said in the beginning, you're a survivor of domestic abuse from both a parent and a partner. And you also have a real passion for true crime overall, and you're an avid reader. So I'd love to know if, there's something in your life that inspired your passion for true crime. Was that from your own experiences, or was that just a function of general interest in the topic?
I've always been curious, but the one thing that brought me to true crime was the Jonestown, Guyana massacre. That took place about a year and a few days before I was even born. When I got old enough to learn what true crime was, that was the one case that gripped me. And I think because of the fact that I'm a Christian, I was always raised and born one. The one thing that grabbed me was Jim Jones was a Baptist minister. So the intrigue there is, okay, how does a Baptist minister go off the rails? And so I did everything I could from a young child up. I studied, I read every book. I've seen every movie. The late great Powers Booth, I think, did an awesome job playing Jim Jones. And that's what brought me into the true crime genre.
That's really interesting.
Right. As I got deeper into it, I'm like, there's other facets of this genre that we need to talk about that nobody is now. Yes, this was the biggest massacre that happened as they want to claim for Americans on soil, even though it was in Africa. But what about those stories we don't get to hear? What about the stories everybody is afraid to touch? A lot of African-American stories, a lot of LGBTQIA stories, a lot of stories like that nobody wants to touch because they're afraid of being canceled. And so that's why I wanted to create my show. I don't care what you are, who you are, where you come from. There's crime that happens everywhere all the time. We need to adjust that. The only way we're going to get through it and ever start solving as much as we can is to address it. So Jim Jones is the nod of why I started. And then my oldest daughter called me up one day and said, let's do a podcast. True Crime and Authors and Extraordinary People was actually the second podcast I've done. The first one was with my daughter, A Day with Crime. And I'm like, I ain't doing that, dude. I spent 13 years on YouTube. That's a whole different skill set. No. And she goes, well, come on, we both like to talk true crime. And OJ was the topic of the day. And so she kept bugging me for a year. And finally I said, my wife, I said, okay, look, she keeps bugging me. It ain't gonna last 6 months. We'll go ahead and do it. 5 years later, I'm still sitting in front of a mic.
So big thanks to your daughter.
Yes.
Well, I love that you shared that because I'm a history buff, I would say like more self-induced. Like growing up, I didn't necessarily feel like I cared as much about history. It felt like I'm not the person who's going to read a textbook and feel super inclined to it, but documentaries speak volumes to me. And so when you're saying that, I'm like, oh, I know I've gone through so many. It's so intriguing to me. And similar to you, whether it's true crime or just overall storytelling in a documentary in nature, it's so powerful to me to be able to help people understand things that are outside of their typical purview. And so when you speak to just the way that, the light isn't necessarily shown on certain communities and their experiences. I was just talking to my wife about this the other day because I have a good friend of mine when we were actually talking about the episode that you and I did together, and that it raises awareness about same-sex domestic violence. And particularly because like on a fundamental level, right? We understand that domestic violence happens and it most likely would happen across genders, doesn't really matter, identities, et cetera. That's sort of irrelevant. But because it's not at the forefront of the conversation, we often think of it as a typical heteronormative male and female dynamic. And so when I was speaking to one of my good friends about this a couple of years ago, right after I'd left my ex, she said to me, she's like, I know on a rational level that this happens, but you sharing your experience with me like really elevated my awareness of it. And so I think what you're doing speaks to the fact that if you don't have representation, it's extremely difficult to really understand at a more depthful level that can create a broader impact, because otherwise it's sort of out of sight, out of mind.
Right. I'll kind of answer that in two folds. Let me step back a second to your history theme. I think history, I don't enjoy it either. But I think it's been proven that if we give people history in the way that they want to consume it, they'll do it. Hamilton, his
Right.
daughter hated history, but she knows every word to that play, right? And there's
Yeah.
been hundreds of thousands of people that's written and said, hey, because of you and this show, I passed my history test and this other thing.
Oh,
I've
it's
learned
amazing.
things about birds I didn't even know about because of that play, right? So I think when we break it down into something that's listenable or something that intrigues people or they feel that it's fun to do,
Hmm.
they'll take that in. And I think that's what we do. We're a lot of the cases that we do or talk about, I know that I do, is history. I mean, Jonestown was 71. I've got cases I'm going to do that's from the 20s because there's always been a misconception that women never really created all these crimes or they were never serial killers.
Right.
And that's not true. But we give it to them and say, here's a book, read it. I'm not going to read it.
Yeah.
On to your other part about domestic violence taking place in same-sex couples. Until I met you, I didn't know how deep that was. I knew that it happened,
Mm,
right? But I think it gets played down a lot. What I mean by that is it's more acceptable to say there's two gay men and they're down for domestic abuse because they beat each other. Because
mhm.
the way society looks at the gender outlet is the male is more dominant, right? More strong,
Yeah, more
what
physical.
happened, right? The woman is usually more docile, not gonna do that. Dude, I know women that could kick my butt, right? I watch professional wrestling. Jade Cargill just came out the other day, and she's got 6-pack, 12-pack. So by having you on the show, I think it did show, hey, there's a lot of women going through this same sex.
Yeah.
I would never know it was that deep, right? I was like, really? A woman could be that brutal? Because we don't ever really think about that.
Yeah.
So
Oh, that's
your
insightful for
episode,
me. Thank you for sharing that, because that's super insightful for me. Like I think that I'm recognizing more and more how important it is to elevate stories like my own as well, because it because it happened to me, it doesn't occur to me that people don't know.
right. Right. And you may never know how deep that is. So you starting a dialect, that's going to help a lot of people. And there's women out there like men that we're talking about today that's sitting there going, well, I can't go say I was domestic abused by my partner because she's another woman. There's
Right.
shame in that. No, it happens. We need to talk about it, get it out there. Let's get some healing. And that's what you are providing. And the most intriguing episode, I think, is one of the most important episodes on my show that I've ever shot. So
Oh, you're so you're humbling me so much and also boosting my ego, which I needed today. So thank you. So David, getting back to your story. So, can you share a little bit about how your interest in true crime intersected with your own story in terms of creating, whether it's creating your podcast or having the desire to help other people share their stories?
as you know, in the podcast game, podcasting is very oversaturated now. Since
Hmm.
2020 came along, everybody and their grandma made a podcast.
Facts.
But my thing has always been I have to have a niche as something that stands out, but I don't want to do it just because I want somebody to listen to me. I want to do it because it makes sense.
Hmm.
You probably can understand this better than some of the artists of the podcasting, but your show is a continuing build in your mind. What can I add to it to make good content? Is this same thing going to be boring every week? What can I do to elevate myself? So as I was thinking about having to revamp my show because my daughter had to quit David Crime, I'm not going to stop this, but what can I do to make it different? True crime was the catalyst. This will get you into the front door. Everybody has an ear. They want to hear who killed who last week, who jumped off the bridge. So if I can get you into that door, I said, then maybe I can share other stories that actually really matters on top of these.
Hmm.
There came authors at that point. I was reading all of these independent authors that was fabulous people that no one ever heard of. 3 of them that I did off the bat was #1 Amazon authors. Didn't know who they were. I said, all right. I went to my wife. I said, what if I do a show called True Crime and Authors? One week I'll do true crime. Next week I'll interview an author. She goes, that sounds great. I'm like, but where the hell am I gonna get all these authors from? No one's just gonna just pop up and say, let's come on.
Right.
To my surprise, when I interviewed LaDonna Humphrey, the floodgates open. Publisher writes me, hey, got all these authors want to come on your show. So then after that, I'm like, I am a survivor of domestic abuse. Men don't talk about this. I go on shows like yours so that I hope men will come out and talk
Hmm.
about it. So I sat down and started talking about my own story at the age of 4, as far back as I can remember. And the one thing that the audience should understand, and people who's been through domestic violence of any kind is like a time stamp. What I mean by that is if it happened to you at 3 and it was something that was really catastrophic, it's a timestamp there. You're going to remember that at 3. People say, how can you go back to age 4? Dude, because the stuff that's happened to me. You don't forget your mom being chained to beds. You don't forget being hung out of 3-story windows.
Mm.
You don't forget your mom getting hit with a plate because the spaghetti was too cold. This is my life at 4. My dad physically abused me. He physically abused my mom. He turned into an alcoholic. I was raped with my dad. And even though he says there was never any penetration, people have to understand there's different facets of rape. There's rape of the mind, there's rape of the body. But he was touching the whole 9. Even if he didn't do penetration, was still rape. Grew up very angry from that. Right. And so then that starts to lead down the path of we as men don't talk about that, especially in the African American and the Hispanic and all of these communities that say that men has to be one way. And so when it came to me, I'm like, I need to share this. And so, yeah, it's true. All of that I just told you was true. My mom, I think, went to her grave 3 years ago because of all the abuse that she took. She had no teeth because of power of the gun being punched in the mouth. That left me with severe emotional problems, right?
Of
Because
course.
that I wanted to prove that a marriage could work, which got me to jump into marriages 5 times. My first marriage was at 19, which is where my abuse came from, right? So you parlay that out of childhood, you go, I'm gonna get out of this, we're gonna survive this, and then you get into a marriage where it happens again. And the thing that men need to understand, and if there's women out here that's doing this, you need to stop this because this is why men don't come forward, is it's used against us as a catalyst. So that means if me and you can be in a relationship and something happened that you didn't like, the first thing you would come back and say is, see, you're going to be just like your dad. I was waiting. Go ahead and hit me. We don't discuss that because we're like, now you're going to put us in this bank that now everything you do will make me mad. You're going to think that I'm going to be like him and come off and hit you. And that's not what's going to happen. So I didn't talk about it with my partners for a long period of time. And the moment I did, guess what happened? Oh, he was abused by his dad. You're going to be one. So it's important we get that out. When I got married for the first time, I got hit in the head with pans. I was locked outside the door in a very cold Minnesota snowy winter, 4 below, 3 below wind chill, because she knew I would not come back and hit her at all because I have a thing against that. And yes, going down the line, there's been a couple of times I pushed women down. I ain't gonna lie, because they were doing things to my kid. I wasn't gonna let that happen. But to just stand up and surely beat somebody, to be beating them, or have a narcissistic attitude, not gonna deal with that.
Well,
So
do
go
you
ahead.
mind if I interject real quick? So what, just to make sure that I'm giving the right context for what you're saying too, is that so basically what would happen is you would have some sort of conflict with an ex, and their way of deflecting or creating, maybe expanding on that conflict, was to challenge really essentially your childhood wound of being abused and saying that's who you are, like trying to effectively say your identity now is rooted in who you were as a child, and you're going to be like the person who did this to you. Is that correct?
Exactly. And even
Hmm.
now to this same woman, because my mom did put me in counseling to handle conflicts. And my mom was visiting one day, and for whatever reason, she decided to go off. And I'm like, I'm leaving. And she stood in front of the door. Now I know I'm 50 and fat now, but back then I was in my 20s and cut and lifting 300 pounds. And my mom's like, get out his way. He's trying to leave. And I'll never forget the statement that she made. She said, I would rather have him hit me than to leave. And my mom said, have you looked at him versus you? Really? And it's
Well,
like
and
that.
also that says volumes in and of itself, right? Like we're willing to take the pain or what we believe is punishment than to feel abandoned and have to confront those feelings, because that's really what it is. Because if you leave or if somebody leaves, then now we are with ourselves and we have to ask ourselves why. And if you don't want to investigate that and you don't want to think about it more, like the easy out, quote unquote, right, is to stay and just persist despite the fact that like the underlying issue isn't really about whether or not you're going to hit somebody. It's whatever this person is feeling that they're sorry. I'm kind of like going off because I'm having like an internal dialogue. I'm like, oh man, it's just so manipulative.
Well, the problem is with that, right, is that now spills over into the rest of your life.
Yeah.
I have to make decisions that maybe nobody else normally would think of because of where I've come from,
Mm.
as far as fighting or retaliating physically. At my age now, I'd rather fight you intellectually. If we want to go
Mhm.
to court, let's do it legally. But it doesn't solve anything to do anything physically.
Right.
I look over my life, I'm like, what did I learn from all of those experiences? I mean, and my mom just kept falling into them, right? So my dad was her first love and he beat her. And she fell into a second marriage with this guy and he was a narcissist and he was beating her. Then the third dude, it's like it became a pattern.
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is the pattern I got to break. I've never beat my wife or hit my wife that I'm with or anything of that nature. But the thing is sometimes I sit back and I'm like, man, I don't condone this, but I see exactly why people go where they go. I've had women stand over me and be like, go ahead, hit me, hit me. You ain't gonna do nothing, hit me. Well, if you poke a bear long enough, you're gonna get hit. And the thing is like I said, because of who I am and what I've been through, I'm not gonna hit you. But think about the dude down the street you do this to. He hasn't been through the same thing I went through.
Well,
You know,
because to your point, it's like if you're provoking somebody to get the result that you're effectively demanding, and I'm not saying like this is, and I think neither one of us is trying to victim blame or shame somebody who does get hit. Like, let's be very
absolutely,
clear about that. But I think the point is that provocation is a manipulation as well.
it is. And it's a tactic that's used because, well, at least back in those days in the 90s, the police will arrest the dude hands down.
Mm-hmm.
In the community I lived in, being that I was an African American with a white person, oh, that was double the situation, right? And the funniest thing I always said when I look back over it is she called the police one day Goes, I'm going to get you arrested. I'm like, I didn't do anything. And she called police. Yeah, he's over here. He hit me. He did this. Now I'm the one with all the scars. I got scratches on my neck, scratches on my arm. And the guy shows up, the police shows up. I'm like, and first of all, this is the main reason why men do not come forward. They laughed at me. They were like, look how big you are and look at her. And you're going to try to tell me that she domestically abused you? And I looked at him and I said, dude, I may be 6'4", 220 cut. She's about 5'2", 190 pounds. It happens. And I said, this is why we don't speak on this, because it's a joke. And they literally went right to the car. And here, oh man, can you believe she was over here whipping him? Well, it's got to be the other way around. And then this partner goes, but then why does he have all the scars on him and she has none?
I mean, this happened with my ex. It was like she tried to say that I hit her, and I'm like, I'm the one with the bruises and the scratches and all the stuff. And it's like the hard part about this, and what you're explaining, and I understand a very big difference also in the masculine side of it. That's a completely separate thing. But it's like you have to hope that the people that come to theoretically help the situation are actually of the mindset that they would believe you.
Right.
Because that's a gamble. You don't know. It's not every law enforcement person is created equal. We all know that. So how can anybody really feel safe to come forward if you don't even feel like there's a sense of consistency in the way that those situations are even dealt with or should be dealt with?
Right. And the thing was, out of all the bruises I have, she has none. Guess who they want to take to jail? So they're like, sir, we're going to have to take you to jail. And I said, well, I know how the law works. I said, if you're taking me to jail, then I said, for what? He goes, we're going to take you to jail for domestic abuse and domestic battery. And I said, what proof do you have that I did anything? I said, I'm the one wearing all the scars. I said, so if you're going to hook me up, you taking her too. Well, the moment they went back and explained to her, well, because you're saying he hit you and we're going to take him, he's saying you hit him, we got to take both of y'all in if you're going to keep pressing this. Immediately, no, I don't want to go now. No, just drop it.
Okay.
Which speaks volumes right there. If somebody, in my opinion, again, I'm not victim shaming anybody, just what I've been through. If you are getting abused and you got somebody sitting there right now, and now you really have no way out of this, meaning that you're going to go to jail, but you're in the most protected spot possible. I thought, what would I've done? I'm like, yeah, just go ahead. He's really beating me. This don't want to get out of it. Let's hook it up because I may be dead the next time you see me.
Right.
But the moment you go, no, that's all right. We'll drop it. That's to speak volumes. And it doesn't. And so you get men like me now that's very careful what we do, what we say, who we tell. I decided this year to make this my campaign because there's a million men out there that's hurting like I was, who has all of this bottled in, who right now, as we speak, is going through some type of domestic abuse situation, but they'll never say it for the reasons I told you here today. You're a man. Look at how big you are compared to her. Look at, how can she beat you? And this is why I added the third leg of my show, Extraordinary People. I said, if I can get people to come on here and tell their stories and be real about it, and I give you the space, the one thing that I think podcasters do wrong, and you don't do this, and I appreciate it. And when I talked to my partner, I said, if we're going to do this new show, this is the one thing we're not going to do. You ever listen to a show 35 minutes in, you're really getting into it, you're looking for some more content, and they go, well, that's time for the day, folks, we got to go.
Yeah.
Now, we don't know what was coming next, right? Whatever you said next could have been life-saving. When I did my show, I'm like, I don't care if it takes an hour and 20 minutes, 2 hours to get this person's story out. If they got something they need to say, I need to give them that room. I invited them on my show for a reason. I'm going to shut you off in 30 minutes or 40 minutes or tell you in advance, hey, my show is a 40-minute show, hard stop, make sure you curtail your notes. Now, you're going to go through and go, okay, what can I say in 40 minutes? That's going to make a difference. Well, I can't say this. That story's too long. I think we hurt people that way.
Yeah, I agree.
In your case, when you came on my show, I actually did that. I went and I stopped it at 40 minutes. And I said, on the other side of this, though, is where the gold is. So if I stop right here at 40 minutes because I want a hard stop, what part of Nikki's story that would have saved somebody's life they never even heard? And I've been asked, how come your episodes, if you look at my individual episodes, sometimes they're 30 minutes, 40 minutes. How come your episodes of people sometimes an hour? I say, have you listened to their story? Am I going to cut them off in the middle of what they're saying because I want to stop at 40 minutes? No. Did you get value out of that? Oh, yeah, yeah. I loved it. Everything they said. That's why I do that. You don't do that as a podcaster. And I appreciate that because I feel
That's
like
why you'll see. It's like the episodes range, right? And I appreciate that you articulated it that way because I don't know that I was very consciously doing that. It was just sort of what I feel is right. And you're correct. If we're going to offer the platform in the space, I mean, yes, we all have things going on in the day and we need to be conscious of people's time. But if we're dedicating this time and saying it's yours to take and to take up that space and to share your story, then like, please do that because as you said, you just don't know. You don't know what impact's going to come from that. And honestly, not even just to listeners, but I think even in regards, I think of an episode I put out a couple of weeks ago that ended up being almost an hour and a half. And it was about mental health. And it was with a guy talking about the importance of men talking about their mental health. And I'm like, this conversation will continue onward, right? You don't want to stop and press pause on the part of the conversation that might actually make the significant change for somebody or the impact. And I think to your point, it's also like remembering that the point of doing this, at least for us in the way that we think about this fundamentally, is the desire to create some sort of connection for people, some relatability. And if you're already listening to the episode, are you going to stop it or are you going to finish listening? Like if you're bored of it, then just stop it. But if you're in it and you're invested in it, then you're not even going to think about the fact that it went longer.
I give you one that I don't know if you heard this yet. If not, I'll send you a link after the show because it's an incredible song. My wife didn't send it to me, but there's a song done by Dax this year called To Be a Man. Longest song I ever heard, right? The song was probably like 4 minutes long. I know some rock songs is 10 minutes, but he invited a bunch of his male artists with him, Chris Stapleton, from all over. And that whole song talks about mental health. Like to be a man, the challenges that men faces that nobody really cares what we do as long as we're providing you with a house and things like that. But you never understand what we are going through in the brain. And he wrote that song because the numbers of males that are committing suicide has went up astronomically. And I know some people say, no, that ain't it. But I really believe that when Robert Williams committed suicide, that opened up a huge dialogue because you looked at a guy that was always happy. He was getting ready to make a new show. There was really no reason that we can see that Robert Williams should have been unhappy enough to commit suicide. When you listen to this song, I'm like, man, yeah, that's exactly all the things I feel. If my house goes under, if I can't give my daughter college tuition, I just feel like I'm worthless as a man. And so that's why you need that space. And you do a great job of giving that. I enjoy listening to your show so much because of that. And I know that at the end of the day, I'm going to get what I came from.
That's exactly how I feel with your show too. I mean, it's one of the things that I spoke to a guest about related to storytelling overall and the art of storytelling is that something that is truly captivating will allow you to sort of just let the things around you fade out while you're consuming it. I mean, even if you're listening to a podcast while you're doing something else, right? Like if you're emotionally invested in the story for whatever reason, it could be enthusiasm, it could be something that's relatable, whatever it is, like that fundamentally changes how you engage with the content. And so this is why I also feel like probably with your show, I would imagine too, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, because of the variety of people that I have on and the types of stories that are being told, like every episode's not going to be for you. And that's okay. I would love it if you're a loyal fan and you want to listen to every episode. And I believe that people can get something meaningful from every episode. But if you're not going to listen to any of it because you have a preconceived notion of like what you want this to be, like it's not the show for you, and that's okay. Like give people the freedom to be who they are in the space that you're offering, and the right people will come to that.
I totally agree. I turn down nobody, and I have the same cups that you have. If it's not for you, not for you. This year, it seems to be I'm getting reached out to everybody in the world who has a narcissistic past, either dealing with a relationship or whatever.
We're all raising our hand. We're like, we need to talk about it. We need to talk about it.
But the unique thing about it is, yeah, it's the same topic, but every story is different, unique. Things happen differently here and there, gay, straight, whatever the case is, they're all different. And I always encourage people, like, it may not be the show for you, but before you say that, why don't you go ahead and listen to at least the first 5 minutes, then decide. I've had people turn me down for my show. Oh, thank you for the invite, but your show is not for what I do. And I had a healer recently tell me that, no, I decline because your show's not what I do. And I wrote back and I said, with all due respect, have you listened to my show? There's a whole bunch of healing opportunities in what I talk about. And I actually had somebody come back and go, okay, I'm sorry, I apologize. Can I be on your show now? Because I want to get this story out. Yeah, we all have a story. And that's why Extraordinary People became the third leg. It was a beta after season 1. I just put them as bonus. I said, let's see if this catches on. And then I announced it was hard in my show now. So in my show, you get, I gotta say, the show, you get 3 different shows in one. I'm gonna talk about some true crime at the beginning of the year or the beginning of the month. We're gonna talk about to an author, and then we're gonna talk to an extraordinary person. And I think all of you guys have been on my show is extraordinary in your own right. And you all have a story that connects. And that's what I did. I'm like, if I can take what I've been through and get people on my show to give credit to that, and then to your own stories, man, imagine what we can do together just to heal that.
Yeah.
And so to me, it's like taking my pain and turning it into something good. Somebody asked me if I could go back and change my life without my father abusing me and being abused by a spouse and being married 5 times, which I'll go a little bit into that. Yeah, I was married 5 times because I wanted everything to be right. The first mistake I made was getting married at 19, which I wasn't emotionally ready for that. I was too young. But back then in the 80s and 90s, us young people got caught up in movies. I forget the name of the movie, but it was some movie where the person was connected by an umbilical cord or something. They knew down the line they would always get married. Being that I was born in 71 and my ex was born in 72, 1 month apart. Oh, this is it. You're supposed to be made for each other. Let's get married. Don't do that, people. But after that one failed, it had nothing to do with fear of being alone. It had to do with I wanted to prove that this could actually work. And instead of taking time to heal in between those and to fix myself, it led me to 5 different marriages. Now I've been married to the person I'm with now for 22 years. We've been married for 21, together 22, but I'm still hard to live with sometimes.
Yeah, aren't we all?
And going in, I said, hey, I'm not going to be the world's easiest person to live with. Here's what I've been through. If you really sign up on that bus, and she had been through some stuff for her own, abuse wise. I says, but it ain't going to be a bed of roses. But so here we are 21 years later. But I just felt that if I could take those stories, wove those in, and use true crime as a catalyst to get you in, then you'll learn something.
Oh, for sure.
That's what's happening.
I think it's marketing genius as well, honestly, because, as soon as Netflix puts out a new true crime documentary, people are like, what's happening? What do I need to know? What am I binging this week? And I think to some extent that can be super toxic. And so what I really love about what you're doing is that you're shedding a light on the reality. So you're explaining that these circumstances happen. You're showing people who could get tied up in the I don't know, just sort of the Hollywood version of true crime, right? And being like, no, this is real stuff. It's not a Lifetime movie. It's not a true crime documentary that's high profile. These are people's lives that are being affected in the everyday world. And whether that is what they experienced and they wrote about it, or they have another story of resilience, like at the end of the day, what I think you're doing is really marrying these important topics with life is not perfect. A lot of us have things that we hold on to that we don't share for fear of either retribution or just embarrassment or shame or whatever it might be, or people not taking us seriously. And then you allow people the opportunity to say, yes, this happened. And what I learned from that was this, because a lot of times on these shows, you don't get to see that conclusion, that part where people are healing through it. You don't get to see, in some cases, because they're not there to have that. But we sort of stop to piggyback on what you were saying before. Like, we stop the story before it's over. We just give it enough to be like, that's fine, that's sufficient. We feel like we've achieved what we needed to achieve to get the interest that we wanted, and now we have it, and now it's done. Now, some people will go on and look into more things and want to go on their own journey with those stories, but you're essentially encompassing that in an episode as best you can. And I find that really powerful because it gives people a chance to observe the intensity of these circumstances and also the resilience required to heal through those circumstances. And so I also love that you've had people on who speak about the healing side of it, because as you and I both know, that and what you just said related to your past marriages, it's like, if you're not going to do the work to help yourself, you will perpetuate the things that you are doing, or you will create more chaos in your life where it doesn't need to be there. And you feel trapped by that. And ultimately, this is our responsibility to heal that part of ourselves. We can't look for anybody else or anything else to do that for us. And I feel like you're really speaking to the power of looking inward in your own experience.
Yeah, because whatever it is that we have that we don't solve now becomes a baggage, becomes luggage, and we carry that baggage with us forever.
Hmm.
I spent years doing that, right? Even though my wife is nothing like any of the exes I was before, probably our first 4 years of marriage, I'm comparing her to everybody else. But you do this and she was doing this, and now you're gonna go do this because she does this. And still sometimes I think I find myself falling back into that because of flashbacks.
Yeah.
Recently, my wife said she wanted to get her nose pierced. Flashback, one of my exes went and cheated on me right after she had her nose pierced because she felt like that she was more attractive. Do I think that she's gonna go do that? No, but in our mind, because what we've been through, and it's hard for us, no matter how much we grow out of it, it's hard for us to put it away completely. That's what we think and that's what we feel.
I love that you just acknowledged those seemingly little pieces of the story that don't come up probably very often. If at all. Some of them don't ever resurface again. They just exist there in our subconscious memory. But there can be these little things that it's like your response is to your past experience revisited in the present moment, and you're like, the self-awareness required to acknowledge that and not respond the way that your trauma response wants you to. You're like, respond like this. This is triggering me in some way. And I think it's important to acknowledge that the word trigger has, I think, been a little misused. I think people kind of, they call things triggers that are like very minute things that are not actual triggers, but related to mental health, something that actually triggers a trauma response that requires you to, in your present moment, acknowledge that your past self wants you to respond a certain way. It is challenging. Like, I have moments where, I mean, my wife and I were dealing with a conflict last week, and it was like, there was no moment in time for me to even process that I was about to have the reaction that I was going to have, because it was just like, nope, it's there. It's here now, and we are dealing with it. And I think that, part of what you're saying too, David, is finding somebody who will ride that wave with you, knowing that it won't be picture perfect. You can have a healthy, solid relationship and still be somebody who has gone through shit. Like, not everybody goes through the same extent, but it's not a competition. And if you are with somebody who genuinely understands that you might have these types of responses or moments in your life, and they can be supportive or give you grace for those moments, I feel like that's such an important part of the healing journey as well, because in my experience, it allowed me to release a lot of shame that I have when those moments come up.
And I think that's one thing too, is I always say we shouldn't feel the shame where we come from. I mean, that's part of the whole surviving the abuse situation, especially on the male end, is because we are ashamed of what happened. Nothing that
Hmm.
happened to us, we wanted. We didn't even ask for it, right? Um, yes, even though I agree that women should dress a certain way, I get tired of hearing people go, well, she went down the street this way, so she was asking to be raped. No, that's not what she was thinking when she put that outfit on.
Hmm.
She could wear whatever she's gonna wear without the fear of being attacked.
Right.
And I think we both we live with that to a degree, which is why I said to you on the show that when you said you had got remarried, I was happy, because a lot of us, we don't take that step because of fear. You're gonna judge me. You're gonna do the same things to me the other person did. I've had that fear for a long time. Oh, you just use this against me because you know what happened to me.
Hmm.
I always told my wife this. Some people say they agree, they don't agree, but this is how I feel. We're broken people. We're always gonna be broken. We just have put ourselves back together again.
Mm.
I call it the Humpty Dumpty effect. When he fell off that wall, he was broke. Piece by piece, we put ourselves back together. The problem is, from the things that we went through in the ages we went through them at, it's a continuous rebuilding process.
Yeah.
And we live with a set of decisions that no one else lives with that we have to make quicker in the spur of the moment than somebody who's never been through the trauma we have. If somebody's getting in your face to fight you, like my neighbor, you listen to my episode about the neighbor, he wanted to fight. He still does. I have to make the decision of what happens if I decide to do that. I know that there's a certain point I'm not going to feel any pain and I could kill him. Now he's annoying me and I really want to go after him, but that decision I got to make in the spur of the moment. What's best for me and what's best for you, thinking about my past. And people don't understand that. They take that for granted and they run with that. So I just
Yeah.
want to say to people, if you're dealing with somebody or you with somebody that's been through trauma, respect that boundary. If
Hmm.
they need to leave or they need to take a walk or they don't want to talk about it right now, you got to respect that because they're doing what's best for you and for them at that moment. If you continuously push that, you may not want to see where that goes.
Yeah.
And we've already been trained and we've trained ourselves and we worked on ourselves to handle that. My wife now, that was the biggest thing. Like, hey, if I go to leave, let me leave. I'm not forgetting you. I'm not discrediting you. I'm not saying I'm not going to come back to it, but I need to go and put myself in the headspace to where I can sit down calmly and talk to you about it. If we handle this now, it's not going to be pretty.
Ooh, I
So
love that you just said that too, because I very similar experience for myself because I was gaslit for so long. So when I feel, even if it's not the threat that my my traumatized brain thinks that it is, my response is telling me to react. And that reaction can be explosive. And I have done a lot of work in therapy over the years to make sure that I can regulate my emotions in a more healthy way because I don't want to project that anger. And frankly, I don't feel good when I do it. It's not like I tried to explain to my wife the other day, it feels like there needs to be some sort of physical release. Like I get so tense. I feel it in my entire body. And I'm like, and I don't know what to do with it. So much like you're saying, if I need to like go, like let me just go. I'm not going to do anything if I stay. Like I wouldn't do anything physical, but I might like pound my hand on the counter
right.
or like get really erratic and like scream or something. And those are things that happen few and far between now, but that was like a condition of my last relationship where the person who's gaslighting you makes you feel crazy and you're trying to constantly justify why what you're saying matters or that you need to be heard or that you're feeling a type of way and they're not listening. And so in moments where I feel like I'm not being heard, that part of me's triggered and it's like, don't respond in the same way. That's not productive right now. And so we end up having conversations, whether it's over the course of that same day or bits and pieces throughout like some extended period of time where we revisit it and we're doing it when we're both emotionally regulated and we're in a state of calm where we can actually be objective about it. Because I think when we're too consumed, especially as the person who's been through the experience, regardless of which one of us it is, it's like, you're not going to have a productive conversation. And we have this desperate need to, or at least I do, to like fix it right away. And I'm like, fix it now. It's happening now. Resolve it now. And I have had to learn over the years that like that is not always the best way to go about it. And it sounds like you and your wife have had some of those interactions as well.
Yeah, she's the kind of person that she doesn't like to have anything linger. She
I get
won't
that.
she won't get a king size bed because she's one of those people that if you get a king size bed, you're too far away from me. So if we have a fight, we can't cuddle. Like we have a fight, I don't want to cuddle.
Yeah.
I want to be on my side of the bed. But that's how she wants to fix it now. And I have to say, okay, with a person like me, we can't necessarily do that all the time.
Right.
I need to be able to sit down and make sure that I'm in the headspace to handle or to even listen to what you're saying to me because all I'm seeing is red right now.
What
And
does
that
it look like for you? Oh, I'm sorry. Finish.
and that's what it no, I was just gonna say, and that's what it looks like to me on that end. What you say?
Yeah. What does it feel like for you to be in the right headspace?
I'm calm. I can rationally think about what just happened and I can put things in place. I'm already a very methodical thinker as it is. I like to put things in place. If this would have happened here, what would have happened?
Mm-hmm.
Let me sit down and think about that. I'm playing that conversation we just had in my head. Where was I wrong at? Where was you wrong at? Where should
Mm-hmm.
I have shut up and just let you do
Yeah.
your thing, right? And so then I'm in that right headspace. I'm able to come back and go, okay, I'm able to listen to you now. First of all, let me
Right.
apologize to you for my end of things.
Mm-hmm.
I could have done this better.
Well, accountability, right? Like, I think that's one of the things that a lot of people struggle with, whether it's personal accountability in our relationship with ourselves or our accountability in our relationship to others. Because when we have to be accountable, if we recognize that we were wrong or we did something we maybe shouldn't have done that hurt somebody, it's like the reason that we don't want to be accountable is because we feel shame about it. So,
Right.
or we feel fear that somebody will respond to that. It's like, so if you can have the accountability and show up in a way that is opening the conversation and not consumed by blame or pushing blame on somebody else, then that's when you get to have that actual meaningful conversation that in my experience also, and I'm curious if you have this feeling as well, is it for me, it's like the next time something happens where like that could have been the response, I find that it's less. It's sort of chipping away at the excess that is there that's creating that bigger response.
Right. And that goes a part of being in the headspace too, because the same thing what just happened to me, just like you, has come up again, but I've handled it differently now.
Mhm.
A lot more calm about it. I'm a lot more calm about it. I'm asking questions instead of accusations, right?
Yeah.
Because what a lot of things happen with us is accusations. We're not really asking questions. We think we are,
Mhm.
but we're not.
Yeah.
So I'm able to handle that better. The other thing I found out about people like us is it's really hard. We want to be right. In a lot of cases, with a lot of arguments we have, we are right. But it's hard that when the partner comes back and go, I'm sorry, you was right. We don't even know how to take that. We're just like, because my wife said before, I said, I'm sorry, did you hear me? Yeah, I heard you, but I have no comeback for that now, right? So when he was fighting so hard to be right, I'm like, yeah, but when it's actually heard and it's reciprocated,
Mhm.
then it's hard for us to take because we don't know where to go through with that.
Well, I
So
think sometimes it's an acceptance of it, right? It's the acknowledgement that there maybe isn't anywhere you have to go with it. You can be present with that and appreciate that that person honestly like did what you needed them to do.
right.
Yeah.
Right. And then it also goes into the fact too, and from listening to you talk about your wife Nicole, which I thought was funny because I looked up them like, so we have a Nikki and Nicole, probably both Nicoles in the same house. This has got to be hilarious. Listen to a tape message. But listen to you talk about her, I think you feel the same way. Is I've probably done everything in the free world that would make anybody who's in a relationship with me run. I've yelled, I've screamed, I've been the bear to live with, I've slammed doors, I've punched holes in walls. But when you get that person that says, no, regardless of what you're going to do, I totally love you, who you are, we're going to work through this, that becomes very humbling. And that's
Mhm.
where I've been now for the last 21 years. There's certainly been a lot of things in the last 21 years on my end and her that we both probably should have walked away and said goodbye. But it's one of those things come up when you say, no, I love this person enough to where no matter what happens, I'm just going to hold on and we're going to get through it. That's what people like us need because we've been forgotten about, we've been trampled over, we've been told we don't matter so many times. And then what happens? People up and they leave us. So we're just accepting of the fact it's only going to be a matter of time before you say goodbye too. So I'm just preparing
Mm.
myself for that to happen. And I know this sounds horrible, but I recently realized that after 21 years of marriage, my wife and I got into a big, huge knockdown drag out about a month ago that I had read something that she says I misconstrued that I read it. And it was with one of her friends who she's known since grade school. And I just went off. I'm like, see, this was happening. I know you two's got something going on. Y'all want to come out. I was livid. I mean, I was seeing red. I was on my way to divorce court. This was the end. And then as he took the guy who I knew to sit down, he goes, dude, he goes, first of all, I would never do that to anybody. He goes, reread the text that you saw. He goes, but your wife loves you more than you think that she does. She talks about you all the time. And then I started listening, reading what she was reading me in text messages, right? It wasn't accusations hurling. It wasn't like, okay, just go ahead and go. It's like 22 years, a long time to be with somebody. I really love you. I really, this is just who I am. And it's true. She calls everybody hun and hugs and all that kind of stuff. But when you are already suspicious of somebody, and that's where I was with this guy, I was suspicious of him from the beginning. That plays a trick in our mind, even if
Mhm.
what we're suspicious of is not even really there.
Right.
But that took me 21 years. I'm like, dang, she didn't even walk away from that. And she was fighting for me not to leave. She goes, well, if that's what you're going to do, I can't stop you. But I was letting you know that this is not what I want. This is what I want to be. And I think we became stronger because of that.
Well,
So,
I agree with you. I think that that strength that comes from those moments of conflict, it's because you both recognize it and you both want to heal through it. And I think a lot of times, like what you were saying, is so often we want to be right. Somebody just wants to be right. We want to know that like we won the argument, right? It's not necessarily about that. It might just be that we need to feel seen and heard. Like Nicole and I got into arguably the biggest fight that we've had, because I would always say I don't even feel like we've really had fights. They're more like disagreements or frustrations or whatever. I mean, this was like very much a fight. And the thing is that it was looped back around. And this was several days that we were talking through this. It was like, I didn't feel seen or heard. I didn't feel seen or heard. But when you're both digging your heels in so much because you think the other person's not getting what you're saying or respecting what you're saying, then like you're creating more and more space between you. And so this is why it's so important to get to a place where you can sit with it, sit with the discomfort, be willing to acknowledge that you're there and come back around to it. Because I was I was so elevated and frustrated and angry. And we were driving at the time that we started fighting, and then we're back at our house. And I was like, I just need to leave. I don't want to be here right now. I just need to go. And I saw the look on her face, and she's just like, please don't leave right now. Like, I don't want you to drive. I don't want anything to happen to you. You're so upset right now. Like, please don't go. And I'm like, I really want to leave, like I just want to go. And the thing is with my ex, I would have gone and I would have been like, screw you. I don't care. But I saw the look on Nicole's face, and I could tell that it would hurt her more and make what we were going through worse if I left. And I was like, okay, like I will stay. We ended up talking a little bit more. We had to like kind of go back around. And like I said, a couple of days of like revisiting it and kind of pulling it apart and putting it back together. But it's like, she even said, maybe the thing is that I shouldn't have said not to leave, but like, don't drive, right? Like, don't get in the car while you're this upset. And so even just that, learning the right ways to handle that type of conflict where we feel so like elevated and upset, that you can come back and recognize that even if something similar to this happens again, you know that, okay, well, I'm not going to just say I'm going to get in the car and drive away, because that's going to concern you. So it's like, I'm going to go for a walk. I'll be back. Let's just revisit this later. Right. And I think giving ourselves time to process it is super important. And I'm like your wife. Like, I want shit to be resolved as quickly as it can be. But I also have had to learn that with the way that I react to things, that's actually probably not the best thing for me or anybody that I'm arguing with. So, it's a little bit of trial and error for ourselves too. It's like, what works, what doesn't work. And if it doesn't work this time, let's try something new next time.
Well, I think you had a couple of nails on the head. I'm glad you brought that up. In Nicole's situation, she has to, as hard as it is, just learn to say, okay, go ahead and go. She was exactly right. She should not let you drive.
Yeah.
We get into accidents when we do that. So
Yeah.
but she should have said, give me the keys. If you need to leave, go ahead and leave.
Yeah.
In your side of things, like I told my wife, when I'm telling you I'm leaving, it's not because I'm leaving the situation. I'm leaving the situation to cool it down.
Mm-hmm.
Know where my mind is telling me to go next. And if I don't get out of here, this is not going to end the way that either one of us wanted to. And it could end up ending more hurtful than it began.
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes for our spouses, though, and I said it to my wife, and nobody wants to admit this, I says, but I think the reason that you don't want me to leave is because now you're by yourself in this bubble alone. And now you have to reflect on your part of the conflict.
Interesting.
I'm not here anymore for you to say you're by yourself. Now it's, what did I do? Could I have done this any better? What did I say? And then here's something you can try the next time. This is what I always do. When you come back together, you're all cooled down and you say, I don't feel like I've been seen and heard. And she says the same thing. I go to what I call my, did you hear what I said test?
Yeah.
Did you hear when I said you did look beautiful? And you watch the eyes. Oh, yeah, I do. Yeah, I kind of remember you did say. I was saying, did you not hear when I acknowledged that you went and did X, Y, and Z?
Mm-hmm.
See, I was listening.
Right. Yeah, I like that.
You thought that I was not. So I would come back and prove, no, I would listen to everything that you said, but it's like you was yelling, I was yelling. Nobody was really paying attention. But here's everything you said. And then she says, oh, you heard all that? Yeah, because I was listening.
Yeah. Well, I love that you said that, Rick. And for listeners, here's your complimentary marriage counseling.
You learned a lot of things in 22 years, Nikki, I tell you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and our marriage is still really new. We were saying like one of the things too is like we didn't meet that long ago, like similar to you and your wife. Like we met and we got married fairly quickly afterwards. And it's like you have to also recognize that you might not know everything about the person that you're with or how they're feeling or how they're going to handle a situation. And coming together and being able to like revisit that with the clarity of mind that comes from time and experience together is also something that's really important to consider when you're going through these moments. And I think that all of this sort of coming into the start of our conversation around like how can you help people, how can you create something that is meaningful to people, like these conversations about our own experiences from the get-go, where we started in our lives, where we landed in the middle and had these moments that were really challenging or traumatic. You're where you are now with a person that you love, that you want to do the things that you probably wouldn't have done for other people before, And I think that says a lot about a strength of character and a willingness of both partners to understand when we need to let our egos go and allow ourselves to just be really who we are in those moments and navigate that experience together sometimes. Because I also think we often get very defensive and then we want to just be like me versus you. And in reality, and this is something that I heard online a while ago, but it's like, it's not me versus you, it's us versus the problem. And it just rings in my head so true. Now, sometimes I'm like, it's me versus you and I want to win. But like, that's not the best way to deal with it.
Well, I'll tell you this, you can be married for a lifetime and you will still find out new things about your spouse every single day. Here's a vulnerable moment for you. Hopefully this gives you some hope. I didn't know my wife very long either when we met. I met my wife on the internet. I lived in Indiana,
Same.
she lived here in California. Um, After we talked 6 months, I said I knew this was going to be it. I made arrangements to come visit her. I flew out here and visited her, which if you know anything about wrestling, there's a guy named Kurt Angle, used to be MMA fighter first. He's always entwined in my story because I met him in the airport reading his book on the way to meet my now
Oh,
wife.
that's funny.
Um, Got together and I said, I'm moving. So I was moved from Indiana to here within a year. She got pregnant first, which is not the intent. And then we ended up getting married all up under a year. We've been together 22 years.
Wow.
So just to show you that don't listen to what people say because you guys didn't know each other very long. If anybody's been married as long as I have, be honest with you, they're going to think I am. It's a learning process every day. You're going to get older. She's going to get older. Things are going to change. My wife, now in her 40s, decided she likes facial hair and she's never liked it for the last 20 years of marriage, right? So I'm like, who am I married to? She goes, yeah, I know I'm changing in my old age, but this is where we are. So I'm hoping to give you some hope there to show you that as long as you work on it, you too have decided that this is what I'm going to do. You are my person. Hell or high water, you'll make it through no matter how long that you guys have known each other.
Oh, I love that. I appreciate that. And it's funny because we met online. It was a couple of months before we could meet in person. The borders were still closed. It was like a whole thing. She was in Canada. I was actually in Pennsylvania, even though I was living in Seattle at the time. So some interesting overlap in our stories there, David. Well, as we're kind of rounding out the episode here, I feel so grateful, as always, for the ability to share the mic with you. And I am so grateful for your vulnerability. I am really hopeful for the impact that your message will have and the way that you've acknowledged the importance of men in particular, really looking at themselves and being introspective about their experiences and being willing to open up about them. It's something that I feel really honored that this season I've had so many male guests who are speaking to this. Is there anything else that you would like to share with listeners of your story or of really like your hope for what you're doing with your work?
Sure. Well, the first thing is I hope that men listen to this and you want to, if you're a victim of this, that you share this. We're only going to heal as long as we have men that's going to share this. Platforms like yours is wonderful for that. That's why I do my platform as well. I'm continuing my work. So a couple of things that you probably don't know, we haven't talked, in a little bit. We've both been busy, but True Crime and Authors and Extraordinary People continues to go on. 75 episodes. I've partnered with LaDonna Humphrey. We're releasing a new podcast called Extinguished that comes out October.
Ooh.
The cool thing with that is the first time I've done this is long form. So that means we're going to take one case, 1 month. So our first case is Superbike. The coolest part about this, though, is there's a new show that just dropped September 29th called Murder in the 21st. Have you heard of it yet?
No.
You need to go check out that show. Murder in the 21st is a show that's actually built around podcasters. So they're dealing with true crime, but they're incorporating a lot of podcasters. We're pushing this show out because my partner, LaDonna Humphrey, will be on that show November 10th for our podcast, Extinguished. She's going to be talking to Melissa Ponder, who's the widow of Scott Ponder. And so hopefully they pick us up for season 2. But we do those cases, nothing but missing and murdered cases. She's worked on Melissa Witt case for 8 years that we think maybe now we're going to get that solved.
Oh, wow.
Talk about the people that's missing and murdered. Hopefully they're out there, we can find them. And so that's where my work is going to continue to lead me down the path of helping people heal, talking about cases that I feel that matters that we don't know to bring them out. And maybe with, all of that and people honing in and people getting behind it, maybe we can get some of these things solved and bring healing to people.
That's incredible. And can you reiterate what date that's getting released? Because I accidentally spoke over you when you said it.
Oh, so Extinguished is going to release October 15th. So just about a week as of we're recording this now. And
Perfect.
It will be when we actually have our episode on there. And True Crime and Authors, Extraordinary People rolls on all the time, week after week. So
fantastic. David, this has been such a pleasure. And gang, that's all for this episode of Who the Fuck. If you want to check out David's podcast, as he's mentioned, True Crime Authors and Extraordinary People is available wherever you get your podcasts. He's also got some video episodes up on YouTube, and the website is truecrimeandauthors.com for you to check out more of his content. And is there anywhere else, David, you'd like people to find or follow you?
You can find everything you know about me there. I do want to say before we go, though, it's not often I sit on this side of the mic. So you do an extraordinary job. Thank you for making me feel very comfortable. Nikki, you are extremely talented. I appreciate everything that you do. Being on my show was the big enlightening period for me, and I'm happy to have met you. So continue to do what you do. Anytime you need me, you know where to get me.
Same goes. Thank you so much, David.